Welcome to the C-Level Scrum Promises, Pitfalls, and Solutions. My name is Richard Marks, and this is part of the Scrum Beyond Software conference. And I'm going to be facilitating this, but everyone is going to be contributing. I'll start. So I've been working with technology teams for over 20 years now, sort of as a bridge between I say I'm half geek, half human, because I'm a bridge between the technologists and the business. And my interest is really in transforming organizations by changing the way that senior management thinks about and operates, thinks about how they want to operate and how they actually operate, using the principles of Scrum, not necessarily that they're doing it. And so I want to explore that some more. I picked this title, Promises, Pitfalls, and Solutions, as kind of a framework that we can look at and how we discuss this. You know, I'll start out with some ideas, but I expect that you guys, the collective intelligence, is going to come up with some great solutions. And just from a process perspective, I'm going to be jotting down some of our what we come up with on this. But I'm wondering if someone else is willing. Would you be willing to take some notes, David? Sure. Also for the team. Thanks. Okay, great. So let's get started. It sounds like there's a lot of interesting commonality, but also good ideas. I want to start out with the promises, and I want to read a little bit of a blog post that Tobias posted on the essence of Scrum back in 2008. And I think it's a good starting point. I'll just read it, and then we can discuss it. He wrote, this is on the topic of organizational change, because when we're talking about Scrum at the C-level, that involves big changes in general, usually from a command and control kind of model to a more collaborative model. And so what he wrote is, with Scrum, the management hierarchies of organizations tend to get leveled, and development teams have a more immediate and direct contact with customers. This is in the context of development teams. The work environment becomes less command and control and more collaborative. Regular open dialogue is encouraged over extensive documentation, and negotiated agreement is preferred to formal and impersonal contracts of work. So the next paragraph goes a little more into the qualities. The qualities of openness, honesty, and courage are fostered at all levels, and individual gain becomes secondary to collective advancement. A Scrum environment is a supportive one where people at all levels show respect and trust for one another. Decisions are made by consensus rather than imposed from above, and all knowledge is shared in a fearless and transparent way. And the last paragraph is, Scrum goes against the grain for most companies in the software industry, where a phased approach coupled with a high degree of micromanagement and an insistence on defined processes and extensive documentation have been the norm for over 30 years. Many companies rely on fear and money as the key motivators for their workers. This approach has shown short-term success, but more and more companies are beginning to understand that it is not a good long-term strategy. Nevertheless, the concept of changing to something as radical as Scrum strikes terror into many executive and middle management hearts. So there's a lot of risk there for the mill, and I'm wondering what you guys think about that discourse and how it applies in terms of the promises.
Promises? You mean promises as far as the expected good results from using Scrum? Is that what you mean by promises?
Well, maybe we should talk about why we think Scrum would be something valuable to an organization. What I heard Tobias say, he's talked about openness, truthfulness, collaboration versus command and control. And so one question is that what we're looking to, is that what we would like to see in an organization from top management? What are we looking for in C-level Scrum? What would be different if we had Scrum at the C-level? What would be some of the
points that Chris made? Just alignment, getting everybody aligned on a common vision, and that would be helpful.
Good, alignment.
It seems to me that if you had a executive Scrum their output would be the backlog for the next Scrum level down, and then the output of, it might be like passing down epics to the next level down, and then they work those epics into stories that go down to the production level, and that forms that backlog. So that's what I kind of see as a cascading set of backlogs starting at the top.
I think that picture is really important, right? Because the hard thing about epics is that the product owner is typically not at the doesn't have the luxury to say, I think our company should be in this business, right? That has to come from the C-level executives. Like, yes, I believe we should make our product into a software as a service, even though we have been in the software ship as a product software for a long time. Well, that's a great product to write. You can write it. Anyone can write this, but who can say that? Well, only the C-level people can do that, right? Now, there may be less crazy shift than that, but like, there are certain type of decisions that must be made at that level. And I think the same level of customer understanding needs to be there. And I think that's where I see Scrum, not just for openness and collaboration, but also that whole like relentless customer focus is sometimes missing. And I'm hoping that Scrum can be one way to get that empiricalism back in to the decision making on these big strategic shifts.
And kind of tying in with, the vision and the customer focus is, if they're using Scrum, it really puts emphasis on prioritization. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to jump on the hot topic of the week and pass it along down that, hey, you need to be working on this, but if they're actually using the artifacts within Scrum and they've got a backlog, they're going to have to talk about prioritization, and I think that can help on down the levels see very clearly where are our priorities with this.
Right, and I think one thing about priorities is also how much of it do we do, right? So, like, do we move every product we have to SaaS, or just this one product to give it a shot? Well, that's a tremendous difference in the number of story points in the development. So it could be, we'll make a bet on this small things, and we'll make another bet on this other thing, so we double down when necessary. That type of language is not there.
I want to go back to something you said, Tristan, about how would we capture what you said about capturing the backlog and all that. What goes above capturing the backlog? In other words, what does an executive team have to do in order to create a backlog?
Well, I guess they just want to go through the framework of Scrum the same as any other team would in having a planning meeting where they're going to put forward their strategy and vision, and they're going to be their backlog items. It's okay, our vision is X. That's one of their backlog items that they have to say, or which of our sprints are we going to be dealing with that, and arrive at a stated doneness, and the stated doneness is probably something that they can pass on to one or more of their product owners to then actually shape that for the production teams ultimately. It's kind of cascading backlog is the phrase that I kind of works for me.
And it gets decomposed as you get to lower levels too.
But I don't think you need many cascading levels. It's probably just like the executive, product owners, production. I don't know if you would need more than that.
Okay.
But it's just really coming up with all the stories in more granular fashion as you go down the chain, so that they can actually be produced upon.
Okay. Stories. What else? What other kind of promises? In other words, what would having a Scrum operating at the C-level, how would that be different than it typically operates now? What would be the value over the way things are done today?
I wonder how often people at that level do retrospective and look at, so at the high level, even the things that they're talking about there, do they look at those and do they look to see what improvements, adaptation, adjustments need? I mean, I would think that they would normally anyway, but I don't know, that thought popped in my head when you asked the question.
I think the retrospective one is interesting because the language used by C-level people for retrospective is incredibly wrapped in safety. So it's like, well, we intend out for this initial launch to have a small adoption so we can grow our IT capacity. The truth is nobody wants to use that product, right? That's why you have low usage on your IT capacity. But they're not being honest with why certain actions and choices led to subpar customer satisfaction, right? So they always kind of like wrap it in the language that takes the accountability out. So while they do retrospective, it's all prospective rationalization why they did not fail at something. But failure is okay. Scrum allows you to say, we tried it didn't work, and we're going to try something else. But I think the language of Scrum is very scary because retrospective is incredibly honest if done correctly, right? It's that honesty that leads to the insight of what to correct, right? But the C-level talent, the people who can raise to that level, is not to be honest. I mean, you're smiling. I want you to elaborate on that.
Yeah, it's almost like it wouldn't have to be that way for an effective business, but it's a habit we've gotten into, I think. There's an expectation that people at a certain level in the organization will never really say anything, or everything will be wrapped in weasel words, I think. And so there's a reluctance to set the specific measurable goals. And I mean, and then there's a reluctance to look back at did we succeed or did we fail.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ego to be manipulated at that level, I think.
And it makes whatever process they currently do retrospective a lot less effective than a true Scrum retrospective.
Well, in my
the way the companies are set up also may be discouraging real teamwork. It's almost like, if you look at the way Hitler organized his cabinet, they're set up to compete against each other. And so we wind up with hierarchical incompetence because of that. And I don't know which is the cause and the effect. Which is the effect? Do we attract people who are like that because we've set the company up that way, or is it something else?
Right.
Well, I think that's one of the pitfalls. Is that a lot of companies are set up to compete, and that's inherent. There's a lot of. We'll talk more about the pitfalls. Maybe we can. I was kind of trying to structure this, but maybe we can just let it go where it may. There's the command and control. There's that model which is different. There's competition for resources and for power. There's all that. Those are obstacles.
Yeah, competition inside the organization.
Inside the organization, yeah. And like you said, a lot of organizations thrive on that competition. And collaboration, they may give lip service to it, but it's when it comes down to it, what people get compensated for in the performance systems often reward that. So I think these are good in terms of promises. Honest retrospectives. I agree with what Christopher was saying. I do a lot of corporate communications work. And most corporate communications, people just blot it out because it's yada, yada, yada. And for most people, it's just the same old stuff. And they think that's great. But it's, for people to... I'll tell a quick story. They had a leadership event, fancy PowerPoint presentations where things would hop around and, they spent thousands of dollars. And then the CEO of Walmart spoke, and he had one slide, and he had 7 points. And he just talked from his heart. And people said afterwards that was the most powerful presentation because it wasn't the glitz and it wasn't all the flash. So what other promises would be about having, if we could change the way that our management, senior management operated, using a more Scrum-like approach? These are good. Is there anything else? What I'm trying to...
I guess the question I have is, would you have a product owner in that model? Who would it be?
Yeah, I think it's, when I thought about it, it's got to be the top, highest rank is the product owner because it's their company, or maybe maybe it's a joint role with, if it's a partnership, but it's kind of their product is the company, right? So
I think there's some truth to that, but one of the models that I push for is for the product owner to essentially control the production capacity. So let's say you tell the CEO that you can't get anything done unless you can convince this product owner to do in his backlog the thing you want to do, right? That really is interesting. Then you basically create like a funnel, right, where you have multiple funnels down to the production capacity of your company, and each of the funnels, so like, if I can draw kind of roughly with it, it's like, imagine like a couple of funnels like this, and this is your teams, right? Well, whatever. So all these ideas of the executives will have to funnel to one of these pipes, and each one of those is controlled by the product owner. Then what it facilitates is that while the product owner, you can certainly say the CEO is the product owner and saying, well, I think we should have more capacity there, we should do this. It makes the discussion